Hello everyone and welcome back to another instalment of the Gooner Ramble. I hope you're doing really, really well. Arsenal just wrapped up their tour in Singapore and tonight I'm joined with Akhil. How you doing, mate?
Yeah, very good, very good.
Very good, pleased to hear it. And from the AST we've got Nigel. How you doing, mate?
Evening, James. Good, thanks.
Fantastic. Pleasure to be joined by you guys this evening, and we've got a couple of topics to discuss tonight. Nigel, I'll come to you first. Talking about the ownership at Arsenal, there's a lot of rumours going about, particularly with regards to Usmanov's shares and possibly Stan Kroenke taking them over. Do you know any more at all about that, and what could quite be going on there?
Well, it's been rumbling for a while. I think we've seen rumours and counter rumours for the last 12 or 18 months where Usmanov might bid for Kroenke's shares and Kroenke might bid for Usmanov's shares. So there's a lot of been posturing. I mean, it's quite clear that there's no relationship between the two individuals, and also very peculiar that someone who owns 30% of a company or the club, Usmanov, has no say in its running, no seat on the board, nothing. It was only recently that he was given some sort of access to the dining facility at the club, but he's got his box up there anyway, so he's not too fussed about it. But it feels like something might be happening this time. There's been no official statement from the Usmanov camp, and the rumour is that he's finally had enough. He realises that he's not going to get anywhere with Arsenal, so potentially would be selling his 30% shares in the club to Stan Kroenke or to Kroenke Sports Enterprises. Usmanov has been a shareholder now for coming up to 11 years. He bought his first stake from David Dean in August 2007. So we would certainly see some changes if this were to happen.
Why is there that sort of exodus towards Usmanov from the Kroenke side of things? I mean, where you say that he's kind of not been given, a place on the board as such, where he's, he owns 30% of the club, but he's not really given, a lot of respect by Kroenke as such. Why do you think that is?
I think they're very different personalities. Kroenke runs most of his businesses on a sole basis. They've got different investing philosophies. They've both come to the club bizarrely, David Dean brought them both into the club, but they come from different ends of the investing spectrum, and they never would meet. I think if you recall back 7 or 8 years ago when there was a cash shortage at Arsenal, there was an official statement from Usmanov, or Red and White Holdings as his investment vehicle's known, about putting money into the club, whether it be via a rights issue or whatever. Absolutely no interest from Kroenke to put any money in the club whatsoever. So it was clear that Usmanov, oligarch investor, would have put money in. I'm not saying he would have taken it down the Chelsea route, but that's not what Kroenke is invested for. So I think it's just a philosophy thing. There's no chemistry between the two. I'm sure they've spent virtually no time in each other's company, if any time at all. So I think that's the major impasse has been, James.
Akhil, we know what the fan opinion is for the most part towards someone like Stan Kroenke. If he was to purchase the shares from Usmanov, how do you think that would resonate throughout the fan base?
Well, it wouldn't be great. And there's obviously Stan Kroenke has taken a lot of criticism. I think the criticism comes because he hasn't quite spoken, he hasn't really explained his vision, he's been in the background a lot. No one really knows what the end game is. But I think actually right now we're actually at a point where people are generally okay. Supporters are okay. I mean, I wouldn't say anyone is favourable towards him, but at the moment he's kind of irrelevant a little bit because everyone's focus is on the pitch. It's on Unai Emery, it's on Ivan Gazidis even that we're going to talk about, it's on Sven and Raul. Stan Kroenke's kind of in the background, and we're thinking, well, actually we don't need to spend much money now this summer. We've got our 5 or 6 players in. We're kind of happy. We're working out, well, how do we get the best out of Ozil? Maybe re-signing Ramsey would be nice, but generally Stan Kroenke's not really being talked about. But if he was to take over the shares, again, he would come into the headlines. So I would like to think, and being from a PR background myself, his PR team was saying, actually, it's better just to leave it at the moment. If we have a good season, people might start to turn around to you. And then also on that, it may be personal for some people, but for a lot of people, it's not particularly personal to Stan Kroenke in this instance. It's more about Arsenal's too important for one person to own it. And if it was the other way around, actually, and Usmanov was saying, I'll buy all of Stan Kroenke's shares, I think it would be the same sort of thing. And certainly us at the AST would be saying the same thing, that we wouldn't want that either. We wouldn't want the club owned by one person. We wouldn't want it to be taken private. We wouldn't want it to have sort of private accounts where we can't really get any visibility. We don't want there to be no AGMs, and all that sort of stuff. So Stan Kroenke obviously has history with fans and it's not positive, but in this instance, I don't think it's particularly personal. I just think it's because of the whole governance and ownership of the club that we just don't want one single owner. We think Arsenal's too important. Nigel, would you go along with that?
Totally. There will be fundamental change. If Kroenke were to buy Usmanov's shares, that would give him 97% of the club, and he would then be able to compulsorily purchase the minority shareholders. So there's about 400 people, including the Supporters Trust, who own 1s, 2s, 4s, 8 shares in Arsenal, and they would be compulsorily purchased, whether they like it or not, by Kroenke to give him ultimate control. The real control, though, is when he gets over 75%, because at that stage he can approve anything that gets put forward as a resolution. At the moment, an ordinary resolution needs 51% of shares to pass, so Stan can pass an ordinary resolution on his own. A special resolution needs 75% of the shares to vote in favour of it. So if he got to 97%, he can do whatever he likes with the club. And Akhil was already mentioned. It would be delisted from the stock exchange. We would lose a lot of transparency around the accounts. It would probably be re-registered in the States, in the state of Delaware, which has a special sort of tax regime for US investors. And he can then, he could take out management fees like the Glazers have done. He could load debt onto the club if he needed to. There's no positives to it to the ordinary shareholder or fan whatsoever.
What is the likelihood of this actually occurring, Nigel?
Him buying from Usmanov?
Yeah.
Well, Usmanov is one of these people close to Putin, and that he appears on the connected parties list, which have been issued by the US government. I think people are probably aware of what's happened to Roman Abramovich and the lack of visa or investor visa he's been given back into the UK. So he's registered in Israel so he can come in as a visitor. I'm not saying this is going to happen to Usmanov, but clearly the investor environment for those type of people is not positive at the moment. His long-term buddy and previous shareholder in Arsenal, Farhad Moshiri, is the majority shareholder in Everton at the moment. I can tell you for sure that Usmanov was at Goodison Park more than he was at Arsenal last season as a visitor. Some people would say that the money that Farhad Moshiri's put into Everton is connected to Usmanov, but maybe that's only rumour. Usmanov's one of his companies is now the official sponsor of the Everton training ground, which is Finch's Farm. That's another way of putting money into the club. And when a club like Everton is spending £50 million on Richarlison from Watford, you're sort of thinking, right, okay, how's this all happening at the same time as trying to develop a new stadium in the docks up there. So I suspect that Usmanov would certainly have a lot more visibility, he'd have a lot more fun, he'd have a lot more profile, etc., at Everton. But the original question, is this likely to happen? The silence is deafening. There's been no comment from the Usmanov camp whatsoever on the heavily touted rumours from last week, which were led in the Financial Times. So it's not tittle tattle, one would say. I could see it happening for sure.
I remember a few years ago we had someone at an AST meeting speak who actually had done some work for Usmanov and I think had been an advisor in some capacity and then he was very much he had the understanding that Usmanov actually does genuinely like Arsenal, support Arsenal, has sort of followed them from an early age. I mean, how much you put into that, someone like that following Arsenal, I don't think he's been watching every game or anything like that, but just taking a bit of an interest. So people were saying that it's not really about the money for him. He doesn't need to sell. He doesn't really doesn't need the money, obviously. So he'll probably just keep his shares and just annoy Stan Kroenke with them. But maybe the Farhad Moshiri thing, who obviously was his business partner, one of his close business allies, he had spent a lot of time with him, has now gone to Everton. It seems like he's enjoying himself. He sacked a manager at the start of the season, brought in another manager, sacked him at the end, and now he's got somebody else in. Just bought a player for 50 million from Watford, as Nigel mentioned. So, he's having a lot of fun. So potentially Usmanov could have seen this and thought, actually, this, as much as I do have a bit of affection for Arsenal, actually, that seems kind of fun, that seems that's what I want to do. And then potentially Moshiri's telling him that, get back involved, get involved in Everton, we can make them great and we can actually overtake Stan Kroenke's Arsenal and things like that. So you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I just think maybe Moshiri being at Everton and enjoying himself might have just had a bit of an impact. It's like any of us, if our friend is somewhere having a good time, you tend to feel a bit of jealousy if you're not having that fun. So potentially that could be a reason as well.
Staying with you quickly, Akhil, onto the topic of Ivan Gazidis, who's recently drawn quite a lot of speculation in what appears to be what could be a shock move to the CEO of AC Milan, which would be really surprising given all the hard work he's put into Arsenal over these past couple of years, to finally see Wenger leave the club in this new dawn start at Arsenal. For him to leave, I mean, he's done a fantastic job, and it's no surprise that he gets attention from clubs such as AC Milan. But, I mean, realistically, do you think this move would make sense for Gazidis, and what sort of situation do you think it would leave Arsenal in if he is to leave? Yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? Because, I mean, he is respected in football. I mean, he sits on a couple of boards with UEFA and he does a bit of work with the FA, I think, and things like that. So he's obviously respected. Arsenal has changed since that catalyst of change statement that he said. Football at Arsenal has actually changed. People kind of ridiculed it a little bit and even took the mick. But you look at us now, we've got obviously the biggest changes. We've got we haven't got a manager. We've now got a head coach. We've got a head of recruitment. We've got head of football relations, which is essentially a director of football. There's been other changes made, and you just think that he's got the power. And we've kind of, I think Nigel wasn't there, but you were there, James, at the Q&A at the end, start of the season, or end of the season Q&A, or however you want to put it, during the World Cup. And he was very much the main man. He brought out Unai Emery. He was next to him. He was kind of proud that's his man. It's his hire. Unai then went, and Ivan took questions from the floor like he usually does. He seemed a lot more relaxed. It was probably the most positive atmosphere that we've had in a while. So you would have thought that actually he has turned the fan base around a little bit. And even when Unai was kind of announced, Ivan was there in every shot. Ivan was, in every photo you saw, and did a few press conferences, and it was noticeable that when Arsene Wenger had his last couple of games, Ivan really wasn't anywhere to be seen. He was in the director's box, but he wasn't trying to get on camera, and I think he wanted to leave Arsenal to it, knowing that there's a new era now, and there'll be plenty of time for all that. So I would be very surprised if that happened. What the attraction is to AC Milan, I don't know. Obviously there are new owners there. There is a project there. But this project isn't over. This project is just starting at Arsenal. So yes, I would be very surprised, if that was to happen. And again, I'm not saying Ivan's perfect or anything like that. But it's just, it would be a surprise if he left at this point when he's finally kind of got what he wants and got some power and potentially getting more respect at Arsenal as well. So I would be quite surprised.
Nigel, we've come out and seen Chips Keswick has made a statement regarding the future of Ivan Gazidis. He's sort of made a claim saying that he's very much focused on Arsenal, and we've sort of quelled any speculation with regards to his future, which I think is a good thing. There should be no external distractions away from the actual football at the minute at Arsenal Football Club. But that aside, do you think that statement's got any solidarity to it, and do you honestly think that Gazidis will still be here at the start of the season?
I didn't think the statement said too much, apart from Ivan's offered jobs all the time and he's never taken any, which I thought was like a statement of the bleeding obvious in terms of, he's still here. Ivan's, by all accounts, is close to the new ownership group of AC Milan. That's clearly quite a big job. The timing would surprise me, because he's now in a position which he's been craving at Arsenal for ever since he's been there, to get the actual structure in place. But you could say that the structure is in place now, and what is his role? The cynic in me says that he's well paid, but he's not a top paid chief executive in the Premier League. If you see what Levy got last season, you see what Woodward at Man United got. So I don't think it's deliberately about trying to get increased pay, but that will clearly be a part of it. Do I think he will still be with Arsenal come the annual general meeting? I think probably unlikely. My view is that there's too much stuff going around this for not to have a real prospect of happening.
Okay, good to hear. On the accounts, so regarding the transfer budget, before the summer, we were told that Arsenal had a budget of about 50 million to play with. Now, obviously, we've brought in players like Socrates, Guendouzi, Torreira. We spent considerably over our budget, about 70 million. Nigel, how exactly does the transfer market work when we've got budgets such as this and we spend quite a bit more than we're told?
Well, first thing is you've got to go back and say, right, who's putting that message around? So was that a message via David Ornstein, BBC, who was fed it by the club, by the PR people at the club? I mean, when the AST last put its figures out, we were saying that the cash available to spend was somewhere between 80 and 85 million pounds. So significantly above that official 50. Everyone thought 50 is the figure, and then we've spent 70. So do we have to sell players now to get that back in place? Yeah, I would have thought there's a couple of names that are probably surplus to requirements, which you could get 10, 15, 20 million for. That would get you back towards the 50, if that really is a true figure. But in reality, 50 was not the true figure. So 70 could be spent easily. We could go up to spend 90 if need be. And we've done it in sensible amounts, in 10s, 15s and 20s, rather than one player for 50 million.
Yep. Akhil, coming to you. I mean, regarding the players we've brought in, we've made some good signings. Socrates in defence, I mean, probably wouldn't have been my first choice at centre-half, but an experienced centre-back that you would hope would aid players like Rob Holding, Mavropanos especially being Greek as well, Guendouzi, Torreira. I mean, it's looking exciting at us with the players we've brought in so far. What are you making of the summer business that we're doing at the minute?
Yeah, I mean, it's different, isn't it? It's certainly different. I mean, we're not really used to signing this many sort of defensive players and stuff. And obviously, the club identified that's the gap that needed filling. offensively, we're obviously we've invested massively in offensively in the last year. In the last year we've re-signed Mesut Ozil, we've got Mkhitaryan in for Sanchez, we've signed Aubameyang, and we signed Lacazette this time last year. So offensively we have invested a lot. Defensively, potentially not as much. We've got obviously young players in over the last few years. So I think there was. It's all about steadying the ship a little bit. So Liechtenstein and players like that are obviously gonna help that. But it's Torreira that I'm really looking forward to. Watching him play in the World Cup, he excited me. I've one of my all-time best players, probably alongside Patrick Vieira, is kind of Gilberto Silva and then even Emmanuel Petit, because I just love those sort of players. So for me, he's really exciting. I think it's going to be interesting to see what Unai Emery does with him, with Xhaka, with Ramsey, with Ozil. There's competition for places there. There's even at the back. We rotated our centre backs on tour. Mustafi actually had a decent tour, and we were thinking, is he going to be one that's going to go out? Callum Chambers, Rob Holding have all signed contracts recently, and then they're two players that I really want to do well, and hopefully there's people they can learn from. Hopefully, it'll just, and obviously, the Greek lad from last year was obviously, he looked good as well when he came on. So, and when he started, apart from the sending off at Leicester, but, so we got a goalkeeper too. So generally we've done what we needed to do, and we kind of can't wait for the season to start now and just see, let's just start playing now and see where we go.
For sure, and obviously there's still quite a big portion of the transfer window left. Let's not forget that. Even though it looks like we've done the majority of our business, Emery has come out and said if an exceptional player does become available, quite similarly to what Wenger said during his tenure at Arsenal over these recent years, then we will go in and go for him. Nigel, for you, we've spoken about the budget, but if there was a player, in the mould of, say, Kingsley Coman, for example, that was available for 50-odd million perhaps, would Arsenal be able to financially go through and make that move?
Yes, my view is very strongly they would. Yeah.
And do you, if it was
simple
possible,
as that.
Yeah, okay. We can leave it at that. But what's the scope for that happening this summer? Do you think?
I think the inbound business is pretty much done. Don't forget that the European window still runs until the 31st of August, and I think there's got to be one or two departures. I don't think he can keep everyone totally happy there, but I've not heard many rumours of people being linked strongly with any clubs at the moment. Have I missed anything?
Apart from the obvious ones like Tuber Akpom, Carl Jenkinson, perhaps Jeffrey Adelaide. What players? Yeah, Spina as well, of course, who's been linked with a loan move. Is it to Besiktas?
Yeah. Lucas Perez didn't get on the second game. That I found quite bizarre. I thought he would get on unless he was carrying an injury, so he could be.
Yeah, he's being linked quite strongly to Lazio at the minute.
Yeah.
But what about the Ramsey contract? That's clearly super crucial to get sorted out one way or the other.
Yeah, let's say Arsenal do let that drag on for a little bit. You'd want to get it sorted sooner rather than later. But if it comes to, say, the 20th of August and he still hasn't signed, for you, Nigel, what do you think the plan of action will be with regards to that?
Well, we've been burnt twice in the last 12 months over players in the final year of the contract, losing one and paying up royally for the other one. One would imagine with the new football structure we've got that is an absolute no-no to allow someone into the into the final year of the contract. But the bar is very high in terms of what the club is willing to pay for certain names, and should Ozil be on double what Ramsey's asking for, or should Ramsey be on the same level as where Lacazette and Aubameyang are? If not, he's got the figure out there. Then, if the club are not willing to do it, then they're going to have to sell him. And is it Chelsea the most likely looking for him? That's a harder one to accept, that he would go across to Chelsea. Honestly,
Akhil, for you, if Arsenal unfortunately do sell Aaron Ramsey, which I hope won't be the case because he's such an integral player to us at the minute. I've seen quite a lot of people on social media saying that they'd be relatively happy to see him go, which bewilders me. But he is a player that I think a lot of people deem as replaceable. He's had his injury problems in recent years. Would you go along with that? Do you think he could be a player that we'd be able to easily replace in that midfield?
I'm not really sure. I think football has changed a little bit. So there are less players like Aaron Ramsey in the world. But if you look around world football and you think those late runs, those goals, and yeah, granted he hasn't scored as many as he did in that wonder season, but he's still a threat. Even in pre-season, he's been a threat at times, with his late runs and things like that. And I just think he came here at 16 or so. He's now in the peak of his career. It would be a shame to lose him. It's a shame when you've worked hard with the player and you kind of lose them when you still think they've got a step to go. It's a very different situation to someone like Theo Walcott potentially, who scored 100 goals, probably peaked here, and you thought, okay, it probably is the right time for him to go. But with Ramsey, I just think there's so much more to come. In those 10 years, he's had a lot of injuries, he's had a lot of spells on the sideline, so he's still got years left in him. So no, I'm really desperate to keep him, and I think he's captain material. I think he's got a right head on. He's got a mature head on his shoulders. So yeah, I'm hoping he re-signs.
This is clearly the final big contract he will sign. So they've got to get it right, haven't they?
Yeah.
And they know where the market is. They know that Arsenal have been willing to pay that in the past. So the question is, well, why not me?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there'll be his agents and third-party agents will be looking around to see what else he would get, and I think that potentially could be the game changer, really. With someone like Mesut Ozil potentially didn't happen because people weren't willing to pay 350,000. But if Ramsey, people are willing to pay 200, 250,000 for Ramsey, then potentially that could be the changing point. But if they're not, then you would expect him to stay and sign.
Okay, and on that positive note, gents, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Been a real pleasure talking to you guys tonight. Please be sure to give the Gooner Ramble a follow on Twitter, like our Facebook page, and of course subscribe to the YouTube channel. Gents, where can we find you guys on social media?
You can find me on 10 Akhil, of course.
Of course, and yourself, Nigel?
Avid follower of the AST account.
Fantastic. Well, once again, guys, thank you for joining me on the Gooner Ramble tonight. And as I say, please do be sure to follow us on all the socials and keep up with when our podcast will be coming out. So that's pretty much it. We'll be speaking to you guys very, very soon. See you later.
Thanks, James. Cheers, Akhil.
Up the Arsenal.